Today we're going to check out the brand new GIK Acoustics GoboBlocks series that you see behind me. Don't get these confused with the sound blocks that GIK makes. The sound blocks are geared towards control room usage and are doing things like bass trapping for your monitors. The GoboBlocks are designed specifically for live room usage to help you record better and control the acoustics of your recording space. We're going to hear these in a bunch of different scenarios, hear some before and after examples, and see how they hold up. Let's go ahead and start with acoustic guitar. I considered putting this at the end of the video, but I figured let's just get this out of the way and hear what the GoboBlocks can really do in the right circumstance. I have kind of grown up working in really big, large rooms with lots of reflections, open sounding. That's what I'm used to. And just as a personal preference, I like things sounding open. I don't really like it when I walk into studios and it feels like you're in a vacuum. There's plenty of situations where that's useful, but all of that to say it's harder to make a dead sounding room sound open than an open sounding room to sound a little bit more dead. And I like having the ability to shape the acoustics in my room, which is why the GoboBlocks were such a good choice for how I like to work. So my room's pretty open sounding. I did some very minimal acoustic treatment just to deal with some issues, but still keep it open. So what we're going to do is you're going to hear acoustic guitar without the GoboBlocks, just open, and then I'm going to move the GoboBlocks in and we'll do some A/Bs and hear the differences. The reason you're going to hear such a dramatic difference is how I'm choosing to mic. So in this instance, I've got my AEA N28 stereo ribbon microphone, and it's placed a little over 3 feet back. This is typically a lot further back than the majority of people would mic an acoustic guitar, but because it's a stereo ribbon mic and ribbons have a pretty big proximity effect, you can get away with moving ribbons way back on acoustic instruments and things still sound pretty punchy and up front. Generally, what I will do with stereo ribbons like the N28 is I'll move them in a lot closer, in my space at least, when I'm recording in this spot. I'll move that mic in way closer and then just use a high-pass filter either on the preamp or in post to get rid of a lot of that low-end buildup. Usually if I move the mic in about 1.5 feet, sitting about right here on the acoustic guitar, and do a high-pass filter up to maybe 150 or 200 hertz. Pretty severe, but it's a ribbon, but it sounds good. And when you close mic things in this room, because it's open sounding, even with a close mic, you still kind of get this nice presence from the room. It doesn't sound too claustrophobic, which is what I like. We're going to go the opposite way. I'm going to place this ribbon really far back, about 3.5 feet back, completely flat, no high pass filter, no EQ or anything. This is just the raw mic signal. You're going to hear a really dramatic difference when we move in the GoboBlocks, and I think a lot of people are going to assume I screwed something up or I didn't level match. I'm very picky about level matching things on this channel, especially when I do a compressor comparison or demo or something like that. But in this instance, when you move in the GoboBlocks, you're going to hear a level difference. Things are going to get a lot louder when the GoboBlocks move in. And I don't think it's appropriate to level match in this instance because I really want you to hear what's actually happening in the room and through the mic. Even not thinking about the mic, just me as a musician and player in the room, when I move those GoboBlocks in, you're actually kind of creating a little room and you're getting more of a buildup of acoustic pressure in this corner as you move those panels in. I can hear the guitar get louder in the room as I move those GoboBlocks in. So I promise you, same preamp settings, exact same mic placement. I'm playing at the exact same level. You're really hearing the difference between just having an open room and moving those GoboBlocks in. And I spent a little time on where to place them. I probably could have done a 10-minute video on the differences between placing the GoboBlocks further back and further in, but I've kind of got a good balance between not having them too close to where things just sound like a little too dead and backing them off just a little bit just to bring things in. Tonally, you'll hear a difference. Stereo image, you'll hear a difference. You're going to hear a big difference level-wise, but I promise you, I haven't changed anything. This is the difference they're making. So let's take a listen to that. One of the great features about the GoboBlocks is their ability to isolate sources from each other. A lot of you have probably seen an older product from GIK called the sound blocks. The sound blocks are more geared towards control room use and to be like better bass traps. The GoboBlocks are obviously made for more live room and, instrumental geared things. What sets the GoboBlocks apart from the sound blocks is, again, the GoboBlocks have a layer of isolation inside of them so that you can isolate out sources if you need to. I do a lot of acoustic instrumentation and folky recordings in here, so one thing that's really common is two musicians wanting to play together at the same time. To cut down on mic bleed, I can actually use the GoboBlocks to kind of isolate each person from each other and still have them in the same room playing together. For visuals, I actually have a really tall, like 6-foot tall mirror that I keep in a back room. If I need to, and the artists still need to see each other, I'll move a mirror out in front of them so that they can still see each other while they're isolated. But the GoboBlocks do a remarkable job isolating things out. So what you're about to hear is I'm going to sit on this side of the GoboBlocks and play an acoustic guitar. I've got a mic on the other side of the GoboBlocks, and you're basically going to hear a feed from that mic with the GoboBlocks and without the GoboBlocks, so you can hear how much they're doing isolation-wise as we go back and forth. I've set the mic at a gain level that would be typical for like an acoustic guitar, but I'm boosting that in post to make it louder so that you can actually hear the isolation a bit more. Just keep in mind, if these were turned down to a normal level that an acoustic guitar would be at, the bleed really isn't that crazy. But again, the GoboBlocks can get rid of almost all of that bleed if you think about this signal being roughly 30 dB quieter than what you're hearing it at. So let's go back and forth. You're going to hear the feed from the mic on the other side with and without the GoboBlocks, so you can hear the difference. As we move into drums, I wanted to make sure that I showed you some examples of using the GoboBlocks to change the sound of something and not necessarily make it better, but just get a different result. Drums are a great example because the room affects the tone of the drums down to how you even tune them sometimes. So, being able to change the acoustics of the space and even the acoustics around some individual mics can make a big difference. So, in this example, I'm going to place a room mic about 5 or 6 feet back from the drum set. Again, I have a pretty open sounding room, so just having that mic back in that location with nothing around it, I'm again using the AEA N28 stereo ribbon mic again. To me, this sounds like a good starting point if you're going to have a more aggressive, open kind of rock sound for something. We could do some parallel compression on that or something, really bring out that room tone and crush it a bit and really get an aggressive kind of modern drum sound to blend in under all the direct mics. As we take the Gobo blocks and remove the top block so they're only 2 blocks high, I'm going to move the Gobo blocks in around the room mic and we're going to change the tone pretty drastically. It's going to not only tighten things up in terms of like the frequency response, it's also going to make it sound a little bit more dead. You're still going to hear that distance from the drum set, but it's almost sounding like the room's changing. And we've done that just to the room mic. When we move in the Gobo blocks, to me, if we were looking to do a minimal mic setup where everything's going to be mono and then we just wanted to add a little bit of space and some air around a mono kit without many close mics, I think this would be a good choice to move in the Gobo blocks and kind of, pull things in, not have it sound as big and boomy, tighten up the low end, tighten up that mid range, round off the high end a little bit. It almost sounds like we go from a big open room to a little bit smaller, deader room. And again, we haven't moved the mic, we've just moved in the Gobo blocks. So, 2 different examples of how we can affect the tone of the room mic without even moving the mic or changing the tuning of the kit at all. We're just moving the Gobo blocks in, changing things pretty drastically. And I don't think it's better or worse, it's just different. And that's what I really like about the Gobo blocks, being able to do things like this where we just change the sound and get different results. And it's not necessarily better or worse, it's just different. Again, really versatile set of acoustic gobos. For drum overheads, I'm just going to show you exactly what I've been doing for recording drums in this room since I got the Gobo blocks. You'll see that I've also got 2 of the GIK PIB portable isolation booths out front. It's kind of a combination of both, and I wanted to go ahead and include the PIBs because I think they all work really well together. The first thing you'll notice is I've got all 3 of the Gobo blocks behind me. I think most people's first inclination when you're using big acoustic gobos in a bigger live room with drums is to experiment with them out front. You heard what I did on the room mic and how you can do stuff like that to shape the tone of the room for the actual drum room mic. For overheads, I know there were some very specific things that I wanted to change in this room because I've had this space for 9 or 10 years. I've done a ton of drums in here, so I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm getting nitpicky about what I want to change and how I want to, improve things overall. So for some of you, when you hear the before and afters, it's going to be a little subtle, but I think it's a massive difference adding these in. And it's not changing things drastically, but in my opinion, it is improving things. So I found that the biggest difference that made the most positive effect on the sound of the drum overheads was putting the 3 GoboBlocks behind the drummer. Even when you're playing drums, you can hear a pretty big difference with this behind you. It kind of helps project things a little bit better and a little bit evenly. I notice it more on cymbals. The 2 PIBs up front, if I had more of the GoboBlocks, I might do them about 2 tall and put 2 of them up front. At some point, I'll probably need to get a few more of these, but I'm running out of room, so space is at a premium right now, so we'll see. The PIBs work really well for this, but basically what's happening is I'm trying to just contain some of the stuff, and I still want it to sound like I'm in a bigger room, but I just, more than anything, I found that a lot of times in a lot of my overhead recordings that the snare felt like it was getting lost, and I was having to tune the snare pretty drastically in some situations to get it to come forward as much as I wanted it to in the overhead. So again, this is kind of nitpicky things on my part, but I've just had this space for so long. I knew that when I started playing around with placement on these, there are specific things that I wanted to solve. So I think overall having these 3 GoboBlocks behind and then the 2 PIBs up front, it still keeps things open sounding and it feels like there's a lot of energy and air moving. But as you'll hear, stuff just in terms of the tonal balance, things sound a little bit more flatter and punchier in the overheads with all these around here. And then more importantly, it just feels like the snares got a little bit more body and it's more balanced and you're not hearing as much of the room. An argument could be made that, some of you might like it better without all the gobos. It's different sounding. It sounds good. I mean, I've done plenty of great recordings without any gobos around here. But to me, these small changes make a pretty big difference. And more importantly, I don't like throwing up a lot of mics. I like to use as few mics as possible on drums. So most of the time when I don't have gobos, I'm doing lower overheads that are kind of like a modified Glenn Johns to keep things lower because I'm kind of balancing between the tone of the room and the direct tone of the drums. It's cool to have these because I can be a little more, different in terms of how I place the overheads. I can put them higher like I've done here. I've got my Gefell UM70s just in a higher, further spaced overhead configuration than I generally have things in this room. But with all these gobos, lots of different options. I don't have to keep the overheads as low anymore to have things sound really punchy and direct. So this is a great option. And again, to me, this sounds much better and I'm digging it, but you might like the other one better. Again, the cool thing about these is you can get rid of them and you can change the tone of the room. So one day you want more open overheads, you can do that. The next day you need things a little more contained and a little more tighter and clearer. These sound great. Oh, come on. Ah! So as you heard from all those sound examples, these do their job really well. I don't have any complaints with the GoboBlocks from a sound perspective. A couple of my nitpicky things are more just physical, logistical things. So the first thing, all of them are held up on the bottom to stabilize them by two of these blocks. I'm going to show you a picture and maybe put a link to where you can buy these, but if you have a wooden floor where you can slide these pretty easily, I would suggest getting some felt bottoms for these. These are pretty easy to find. They're just for moving furniture around on wood floors. This name brand and size fit on the bottom perfectly and covered a lot of area, so I definitely recommend those. Those worked perfectly for these. Second thing, one of the cool things I'd like to see GIK do at some point is offer another one of these blocks that has some sort of clear window in it. Would be cool to put one of those in the middle or the top, so when you're putting them between artists, you can still have a line of sight. That'd be a cool thing to do. Very last thing that I just wanted to say is it can be a little difficult to move these around on your own. It's definitely doable. You probably saw me do the shuffle in a few spots moving the panels around. But let me just show you. These kind of remind me of amp cabinets, and one thing that makers do on amp cabinets on the side, here, we'll turn it this way, is put carrying handles where you can put your hand in here and carry them a little bit more easily. It'd be cool if they did that at some point with these so that when you reached around to pick them up, you actually had something to grip onto. Other than that, you know, they weren't too hard to move around, but a couple of those small changes would be cool. Other than that, they sound great. You actually have connectors at the top where you can connect them and form a straight wall to make them more stable if you really want to do some bigger walls. But other than that, really happy with these. As you heard, they make a big difference acoustically. So lots of cool options that you can do and configurations with these. So check out the new GoboBlocks.